All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. So glad to be speaking to you on Monday. It is 2 p.m. Eastern as I'm speaking live, 11 a.m. Pacific time. And today is Monday, which is Arlen Grossman Day. Arlen, every Monday, co-hosts with me, and it's great to have Arlen with us. But unfortunately, he's been fighting a cold, and he let me know that he's not able probably to make it. Now, I'm hoping he may still join in. If he does, I'll try to get him right on. I think I'll be able to do that. Arlen, also, if you have trouble with the video, you could just call the regular number, which everyone is totally invited to call at any point, 240-242-5646. That's the number for Halitics. And when I'm live, we'll take your calls. And I want to hear from you. That's what I do that I think really is unique. If you can find another live streamer, another YouTuber who routinely asks for and entertains calls and responds directly to what the caller has to say, I'd love to know. The only other YouTuber I've seen take calls at all from real, viewers, unlike someone like Jimmy Dore, who takes Joe calls, like Robert De Niro will call in or Joe Biden will call in, but it's really just an impersonator. Sam Cedar, to his credit, and I think of him as one of the more reprehensible and loathsome people online on YouTube, nevertheless, to his credit, does take sometimes one call on each show, and he usually uses those callers as props to present his own worldview. And if they don't completely comport with his, they don't give him attaboys and tell him how great he is, he tends to go after them. But that said, he does take calls, and that's what I do. 240-242-5646. I know you can watch people like Tom Hartman and the like, but really they're radio hosts who also put their shows on the internet for viewing. And they're not taking calls through the internet. They're just taking it through the radio. So I do the actual YouTube live stream by taking calls. If you know someone else who does that, I'd love to know who they are. I'd love to see those shows. 242-5646. In the 240, that's how you reach me. And I do hope, please, if you're watching, and if you are hearing my voice now, you're watching either live or perhaps on delay. I hope you'll click subscribe. That would make such a difference to me. It really would. I'd love to know that you enjoy this program. And the way to tell that, the way to prove, the way to show support is click like, click subscribe. We'll build this thing. We're going to build this thing into a real powerhouse. And that is, and I'm seeing it. I'm seeing the numbers grow, albeit a little more slowly than I would like, but I'm seeing them grow, and hopefully that will continue. Because really, we need to make a change. Things are not the way they should be in our country. We're dangerously off kilter. We're dangerously off course on the entire planet Earth, the spaceship Earth. We need to right the course. And that's what we're aiming to do here at Halitics. From Arlen. Arlen says, ignore those pesky polls and stick a fork in Trump. He's done. And I was so hoping he'd explain this. He would do a much better job maybe next week. This is, by the way, at thebigpicturereport.com, and also getting a lot of play at Coast, Daily Coast, where Arlen frequently posts. And it's really no surprise, right, that Coast would like it. I mean, that's a pretty standard establishment Dem place, right? I mean, that's pretty much where I'd say the self-described liberal Dem, maybe liberal to progressive, not diehard progressive, but the self-described liberal to progressive, but still any blue will do Democrat. That's where they hang out. And so they do suffer from what I would certainly call Trump derangement syndrome. That's believing Trump is the worst president we've ever had, when clearly he's not, believing that he is the real threat to democracy, not a symptom of a country that is no longer a democracy. So I think that's kind of where they are, and it is not surprising to me that at Coase, this type of article where Trump is going down for the count would be very, very popular. And I think it's also because it's wish fulfillment. I mean, that's what they want to believe so badly, that this is just some kind of weird aberration, that it's not like, Trump actually is speaking to people who have not been spoken to, who have not been heard. That's not the view at Daily Kos whatsoever. That's my view. That's not their view. And so the hope is he's just this weird, thing that just happened, like a flu, like the plague. And then after a while, he'll go away. Maybe there'll be some dead bodies, but, he'll pass over. But that's just clearly not, as long as he can be defeated in the polls. But that's just not the case. Trump is clearly a symptom, not the cause of what ails us. And he's not even the biggest problem, right? He's not even the worst symptom by far. The worst symptom is endless war. The worst symptom is ongoing environmental collapse. That's what we're really facing. And I wish this was more widely accepted and understood. Sadly, it's not. Will Trump senility save us? I think we may have Arlen. I heard a little ring-a-ding-ding. I'm hoping that might be Arlen. So let's see. Yes, I think it may be. Let me admit him. And we'll get to him. We'll get to Arlen in just a moment. Hopefully we'll also... There we go. I hear Arlen. He is there. Let's see if we can get to him. Hey, Arlen, hold tight just a sec. I'm going to get you on, I promise. We're doing a little bit of explanatory stuff right now, and we'll see if we can find Arlen. Arlen, there's his head. Oh my God, this is so much work. I thought I had him better situated. This is why I try to get people on at the beginning, but I know Arlen has been fighting a cold. Arlen, so I billboarded it. I know you've been struggling, and I do appreciate your joining us. And maybe you can do a much better job than I can. I was trying to explain your article, and I was having a little bit of difficulty. I think I may have been, I wasn't giving it justice. I was being a little bit maybe unfair, suggesting that it could be to a degree a product of Trump derangement syndrome or wish fulfillment, as opposed to fairly characterizing it. Arlen, as we talk about will Trump senility save us, I was thinking something. You posted some stuff on Facebook in the Halitics group that got a lot of negative pushback. And whereas if you posted that on Kos, it probably would get a lot of attaboys. Wouldn't you agree?
Generally, yes. The Halitics is not, I'm not very popular. There's a few people like me, and there's a few that don't. So that's to be expected. They're not going to change their mind.
Don't you think? And you're not going to change yours. To be fair,
I never change my mind.
You're not going to change yours. They're not. But don't you think that's a big problem, because we're not talking to each other? There's all these different silos. There's the Daily Kos silo, where Trump is the worst president ever, where Trump is the problem, not a symptom of a much greater cancer that has metastasized not through the United States alone, but through the entire planet. That is not the view of the people at Kos. And isn't that such a big issue, that we just simply are all talking only to ourselves, to each other, in echo chambers?
That's been the case for a very long time. It will probably continue to be the case. It's just where we are right now as a country, and it's a shame. Ideally, we should be talking to each other and coming to some compromises. I know the Congress is trying to get some kind of immigration bill, and they sounded like they were talking to each other fairly well. But yeah, it's a problem ever since, well, in my opinion, ever since Trump came aboard, we've had this problem. And his people went extreme to one end. And
so you're saying that, but then who, if that's true, Arlen, if we used to have dialogues among different groups of people with slightly different or with significantly different interests, who were the spokespeople for the homeless who were speaking in the George W. Bush administration? Who were the folks who were the pro-peace people who were in the Obama administration when it came time to, say, invade Libya? Where are all these other voices? Because I agree with you, there's extreme right-wingers who are talking sometimes, extreme, let's say corporate, conservative corporatists, and there are liberal corporatists who are talking to each other. And we'll even get a dialogue between, say, Gail Collins, who I would call a liberal corporatist, works for the New York Times, and Bret Stephens I'd call a conservative corporatist. But where are the voices for peace? Where are the voices for much, much higher taxes on the rich? Where are the voices for moving forcibly right now away from fossil fuels? Because I'm not aware of those voices being heard anywhere.
You're right. And I think part of the problem is the homeless don't have much money, Al. They can't donate to candidates. They can't, push their viewpoint very far because they just don't have the power or the money to do that. And, that's a big problem. Those who have it, like corporations and billionaires are able to, give lots of donations to their favorite senator or representative and get things done that they want to get done that benefit them. But, we're not there now. And it's gotten, unfortunately, it's gotten worse. It's gotten extreme. And, somewhere along the line, we're going to have to figure out a way where we're talking to each other and not, slipping off into our own little camps and not even acknowledging the other side. So, it's a big problem. It's gotten worse, and I hope it improves at some point.
So then shouldn't your column in Daily Kos be teaching, using Trump's rise as a teachable moment for Democrats and for the Any Blue Will Do crowd, that Democrats need to speak for poor, struggling, and working people rather than for elites, that Democrats need to listen to the families who have had troops, in their family members on deployment 4 or 5 times over and over. Listen to people who feel angry and resentful that we're involved in these endless wars overseas and we're not even helping poor, struggling, working people with their hospital bills. Because I don't see that. And I shouldn't just pick on you. That's not fair to you. But shouldn't the Kos be a place where these so-called Any Blue Will Do Democrats are confronted with the very clear and obvious failings of their own party?
Well, Hal, I don't know if you noticed, but interestingly enough, that article at the Daily Kos elicited a lot of comments. A lot of people read it and wanted to talk about it, and there were viewpoints on all sides. I tried to respond to many of them, and I said some of the things that you're talking about. The Democrats need to do certain things. They need to start working for the, working people like they used to. They should be pro-union more. They should be, working for higher minimum wage, and all these other things that they haven't been doing so much lately because I think they're kind of feeling they have to go where the money is, and it hasn't been a good thing. They have
to, or they want to.
Well, I think it's almost they have to in a way, because that's just the way our system is set up. The Supreme Court says, money is free speech and you could give as much as you want. So those who have that money are going to take advantage of that. So, I think it's something that the Democrats don't necessarily want to do, but they figure they have no other choice.
Well, you're a lot more forgiving of them than I see the people like Dick Gephardt and Howard Dean, the late Howard Dean, leaving the Democratic Party and cashing in.
Whoa.
Isn't he dead? I thought Howard Dean recently died. Am I wrong about that?
Not that I know of.
Oh, we better look that up, Arlen, because I could be totally wrong about that. But my sense was that he had, in fact, I'm going to look that up in a second. You look, well, I'll do it, I guess. So, Arlen, what else? Let's get into your piece. I did read your column closely. I did not read, however, the comments. I read it more and you're absolutely right. I don't know where I thought Dean had died. Maybe he retired. I'm not really clear. But no, you're absolutely right. I don't know where I got that very bad information. I'm glad you corrected me on that, Arlen. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sure he'll be upset to hear that he's dead.
Well, he'll be glad to know he's not. I think it's.
Yeah, but you're right. Yeah, that's probably true.
We'll probably ultimately get to that place. So what you this is, and let's you know what? Rather than even asking you to clarify, let's go to your exact word. And Arlen, I hope you're feeling better. I know you've been struggling. So let's see. Let's go to your actual words, your actual comments, because I think this is the best way to examine where you are.
Yeah, there's several places you can find it. You'll find it on my the Big Picture Report blog, and on the Daily Codes and Facebook. So, there are places to see it. I'm going to go to one of those now.
So here we are. You can just look at your screen. Can you see this? You should be seeing. No,
I'm not seeing anything
now
on the
you
screen
should be seeing it. You should now see it.
Myself.
Now, if you look at me, you'll see.
Oh, yeah.
I can actually, yes. So you're taking issue with the conventional wisdom that Trump is going to be the nominee. And you've been saying that for quite some time. And the latest, the two state results we've seen, one from the Iowa caucuses, which Trump won by a slightly over 50%, which is exactly the same percentage he got in New Hampshire. Those two states don't call, I guess, do they reinforce, do those results where Trump did not win by enormous margins? From your perspective, does that actually reinforce your perspective going forward?
Yeah, I think it does. I think one of the points I made in my article was that, he was in Iowa, he was 30 points ahead of Nikki Haley, 30 points ahead of DeSantis, and people thought, well, it's not even close. But if you consider that Trump himself only got barely 50% of the Republican Party votes, you got to look at it that way. There's a lot of opposition out there to him. A lot of people still aren't on his team. So, I think a second view of these things gives you something to, where my point of view, I think, holds up better. Same with New Hampshire. I mean, Haley was only about, 8 points behind. So, considering all the, power, all the money and all the power that Trump has, and all the people on his side, I think Nikki Haley did pretty well.
Well, you're watching Halitics, by the way, of course, with Arlen. It's Monday with Arlen and Arlen. So glad you were able to make it on. I hope it wasn't something I did that made it tough for you. I know you were struggling a little bit to get here, so I greatly appreciate, of course, your joining and really bringing, like I said, I don't like the silos, so I'm glad to have somebody with a different perspective on, and we're not that different. I think our goals are similar. It's just that how we achieve those goals is very different. And that's what we often discuss.
How do you feel about my point that really Trump isn't that strong, and that he's got a lot of issues, and it seems to, I think it's going to get worse because he keeps talking with, it doesn't make any sense. He shows more signs of dementia, more confusion, more stress from his court cases. I think that's all going to catch to him.
I do not think you're correct here, Arlen. I really don't. I think all that is true. I don't think you get the facts right, but I think your conclusion in the end is incorrect. I don't see Trump not getting the nomination unless somehow he goes to jail. I certainly don't think if he doesn't get the nomination, if he's not the Republican nomination, I don't think it will be for lack of popularity or because the Republican voter base wanted to go in a different direction. So to the extent, and you do suggest that, I mean, you don't really come out and say why, what will be the mechanism whereby Trump doesn't get the nomination, but you seem to be implying, and this is how, as I read it, this is what I inferred. So maybe I'm wrong. My inference from what you wrote is that the Republican base will wake up, or Trump himself is going to pull out. But there's going to be, perhaps because of the lawsuit, the criminal cases, and just a general recognition that this guy should never be, shouldn't come within, 100 yards of the White House, even on a White House tour. So that's sort of my sense of what you wrote. But maybe there was a mechanism by which you think Trump won't make it, and I missed that.
Well, my feeling is there's still a lot of time until the election day. There's a lot that can still happen, and I think all the trends, in my opinion, are going against Trump. I think he's sounding, like I said, crazier and crazier, confusing people and confusing events more and more. And I think people have to notice this. I don't, Nikki Haley is talking about it, so people who listen to Nikki Haley will recognize it, and so will many other Republicans. That he's not as strong as he was at some, earlier. And there's definite signs that all his court cases, he's got 91 felonies he's going to have to deal with. I mean, they're going to start piling up. He's going to be more and more stressed by them. He's going to get, certainly, I would hope, charged with many of those, and maybe have the possibility of going to jail. So, Republicans have to be worried. I don't see how they're not. I think the more reasonable ones, the ones that are not totally into the Trump cult, have to be able to see that, I think, and have to worry, because otherwise, if it's not Trump, it's going to be Biden, and they don't want that.
Well, you're watching Halitics with Arlen Grossman. I hope you'll click like. I hope you'll click subscribe. I put the most recent polls on the screen there, and this I don't know how this is Trump v. Biden, okay, and we also have some polls with Trump against the Republicans. Trump's beating Biden in every poll that's been released there, you see, since January 3rd. And I made a big deal about how on The Hill Rising, which is a competitor program, I don't know if they know I compete with them, but I compete with them. I don't know if I'm on their radar screen yet. Hopefully we'll get there. That they cherry-picked a particularly unreliable poll, the Harvard-Harris and then the Messenger-Harris-X poll, the same pollster, Harris-X, whatever you want to call them. Very unreliable pollster. That's a garbage poll as far as I'm concerned. They cherry-picked that poll for the position that Trump has a 6-point lead. But it's not just that one garbage poll. In the Reuters poll, which just came out, and that is a reliable pollster, at least, and I base this on 538.com. You can see Trump there has a 5-point lead. In the Econ YouGov poll, which is a very reliable pollster according to 538, it's very close, no question, but still Trump is ahead. Morning Consult, not a bad poll according to 538. Trump's got a 5-point lead, Arlen. So it's not just one pollster, it's consistent. Trump is slightly, he's running, I would say, the polls are pretty clear. He is slightly ahead of Biden right now. And he doesn't even need to win the majority vote. We know that he doesn't need to win the plurality. The Republicans have an advantage in the Electoral College. If he gets more votes, I believe, if he gets the most votes of any candidate in November, he will be president again. So I guess I just look at this data and don't agree with you. That's where it comes down to.
Okay, you're looking at data that's some of it several weeks old, and I think the downward trend has really started in the last couple of weeks since the Iowa caucuses, and then New Hampshire.
The latest poll, though, that just came out, Arlen, the latest one that came out Friday, Trump +5. So that's not a negative
deal, because we got months and months until the actual election in November. A lot of things are going to change, and I think, as I'm trying to say, is Trump is just going to get worse and worse. He's going to show more and more that he's unstable, he's confused, he's turning toward dementia, all those things that we've seen before, but I think people hopefully will recognize it even more, because I think it's getting worse. So I don't see those as very significant poll numbers that push Biden out of there. I think there's still plenty of time and things will change.
Well, you might be right. Of course, there's definitely plenty of time, and I'm not a gambling person, so I wouldn't bet anyway on the results. But if I was forced to, I don't know where I would go at this point. But to say that you think Trump is on his last legs, I'm not. I just don't see it. You asked me where I am on that, and I guess I just don't see it. And I think some of the some of the views, and I just showed that up there. So a 538 ranks, I don't know, several hundreds of polls, maybe 500 or 600 polls. The Ipsos poll is ranked 17th most accurate. So it's in the top tier, maybe in the top 1%. He gives it a 538 ranking of 2.8 stars. This is like the Michelin guide where 3 stars is the best you can get. So Ipsos is a very solid poll. Morning Consult less so, but those are 2 recent polls in which Trump has done quite well. So
what does that mean? Excuse me, what's poll score mean? 0?
It means the lower you get, the better. I don't really understand those numbers. I just give them to everyone. Transparency means, I think that's kind of obvious. They tell you their methodology, how many people they call, what kind of, do they use landlines, do they use cell lines, do they use internet? That's transparency score. Polls analyzed, I think if you're over 100, that's a pretty significant sample size. So you can see Ipsos is a well-known pollster with a lot of polls. The more analyzed, the more reliable Silver deems them to be. So I'm just making the point that this is a reputable pollster, as is Econ YouGov, and Morning Consult, not garbage like some of them. He just says poll score, the negative. I think that has to do with variability. In other words, do they jump around a lot? The less variability, there's a negative. It doesn't vary that much between polls, but I really don't understand it completely. But the point is, a lower number is better. And so in lower negative numbers, better. Negative 0.9 is better than negative 0.4, since 0.9 is less. Negative 0.9 is less than. So the point is, again, these are decent polls. At least Ipsos is. Trump is ahead. I mean, he is ahead, and he's way ahead. I don't have the Republican votes polls up, but he's up by 60 to 80 points right now in the Republican primaries in the most recent polls. So I just don't know what you're. I'm not saying you're wrong, Arlen. I'm not trying to put you down. I just don't see the data that supports your theory. That and I see the facts. I mean, I know what you're saying. He's demented. He's confusing people. I think what you miss, Arlen, seriously, is that the people who support Donald Trump, they're very, very suspicious of all so-called establishment, elite media, corporate media, whatever you want to call it. Even Fox. I've seen them go after Sean Hannity. Trump supporters go right after Sean Hannity in 2016 because he was not supporting Donald Trump. So these voters believe, and I think with good reason, that we were talking about how the voices aren't being heard in corporate media, right? Homeless voices. Trump supporters aren't homeless, but working collar voices aren't heard. Blue collar voices aren't heard. Steel workers aren't being heard. None of them are heard in the corporate media. None of their voices are raised in the corporate media. And so they don't care about stuff like, well, do Gail Collins and Brett Stevens in the New York Washington Post, or New York Times rather, what do they think of Trump? They don't care. I understand you care. I understand people that I know read their columns and think, oh my gosh, Trump is awful. But these people don't care, and it's understandable why.
Well, I'm not dismissing the polls, Hal. I think they have a legitimate purpose. I don't know where you came up with, 30, 50% lead or something. What did that mean?
Okay, so let me show this now because I can get this. What I'm talking about is the polls in the Republican primary is where I was going with that, Arlen. And I think I can give you that in just a sec. Let's see if I can put this on the screen. Just the slide deck. So we'll get it right here. I'm just going to put it on the screen correctly so everyone can see it, including you. Want to fit this correctly on there. So these are just polls that were taken of Republican primary voters. And this is the most recent data as of Friday. Okay? So let's look at this. There you go.
Oh, there we go.
So In the Morning Consult poll, Trump is up by 63 points.
Yeah.
And he has 81% approval among Republican primary voters in that poll. Up by 63. And the Reuters Ipsos Morning Consult, not such a reliable poll, I mentioned, is ranked 117th among all pollsters. And reliable polls get it wrong. It's not like these are the be-all and end-all. But look at those numbers, Arlen. In the Reuters Ipsos, a more credible, more reliable poll, you're seeing Trump up by 45 points over Haley. And DeSantis and Ramaswamy, let me just say, and DeSantis and Ramaswamy are both included in those results. They've dropped out and they've endorsed Trump. So that gets the Trump up into that 75-80 range if DeSantis and Ramaswamy's supporters, by and large, go for Trump.
Yeah, I don't buy it. I mean, I think those who think that they can, figure out the polls this early and this much in advance, I think are wrong. I think it's going to be a trend. And I think, all you have to do is look at the election results, the last two primaries, and Trump did not overwhelm anybody in Iowa, and he didn't overwhelm anybody in New Hampshire. So then those are real people who are actually, voting, or at least that, maybe not in Iowa. They've got this weird caucus thing, but I just don't think much of it is meaningful at this point in the game. It's like I say, it's early. Trump is starting to get much worse, I think, from what I've observed. And I think more and more people will pay attention to that. And also, yeah, sure, there's going to be the Republican, cult that will never move away from Trump, but I don't think they're large enough. They don't have, the votes necessary to win a presidential election, for example. So Trump is going to need independents. He's going to need wishy-washy Republicans. He's not going to be able to easily get those, I think, as we go more and more as time passes by. So, all I can say is let's wait a month or so, see how things are going, and I think you'll see a big difference.
Well, I mean, you might well be right, Arlen. I don't, again, you asked me where I stood on this, and I'm just not seeing what you're seeing at this point. I do want to, and I've got it on the screen there. You're pointing out one well publicized gaffe, if you want to call it that, by Trump, where he confused Haley and Pelosi. Let me play that. I wanted to get that clip on. I haven't played it yet, Arlen, so I thought it was worth sharing with our viewers. And again, viewers, please do join us, 240-283-7262, 240-283-7262. No, I got it wrong, right? 240-242-5646. Yes. Arlen catching me out. Go with the number on the screen. That's going to be correct 95 out of 100 times. I'll be right. If there's a disagreement, I'll be right 5 out of 100 times. The number will be right 95. It's not always right, but it's more likely. Let's put it.
How are you going to know anything else? I mean, it's
look,
right there on the screen.
It's right there on the screen. So go with what's on the screen. Here is Trump getting it very, very wrong. And again, let's play it rather than I don't need to editorialize. It's clear. He blows it. Let's get it up there.
By the way, they never report the crowd on January 6th. Nikki Haley, did you know they destroyed all of the information, all of the evidence, everything, deleted and destroyed?
That was really short, Arlen. I wish there had been a longer video, but there really wasn't of it. There was, I just didn't get it. So that's on me. But clearly he's saying Haley is the one who was destroying videos of January 6th and the like. But isn't that understandable? I mean, he's campaigning. His chief rival is Nikki Haley. Here are two women he doesn't like, Nikki Haley and Nancy Pelosi. I mean, I'm not defending Trump. I think it's a mistake, clearly. And he's clearly somewhat of a deranged individual. I think of him as much more of a pathetic. I actually think of him mostly, when I do at all, he's a pathetic narcissist is how I see him more than anything else.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what he is. He's somebody who only thinks of himself. His braggadocio clearly reflects insecurities. He was born on third base, and he's never really he did get home. I mean, he became president, but he couldn't even see it, take it joyfully, because he lashes out at people, say, well, you didn't even get the most votes. I mean, he's a lame, pathetic, weak person in a lot of ways. But I can't see that as some evidence that he is demented.
Well, there's one thing you should pay attention to, and that is Nikki Haley is calling him out on a lot of these things, and his other rivals were not. DeSantis and all the others, they pretty much gave him a pass on a lot of his mistakes and confusion and, like I say, symptoms of dementia. They weren't willing to attack him head on. When Nikki Haley realizes she has to attack him head on if she's going to get anywhere, and she's starting to do it. So she'll be reminding voters, I think, what he's doing. And I think that'll make a difference.
All right, well, let's just look at those polls one last time. There's a good slide with all the most recent polls on them. Trump with an enormous lead, virtually insurmountable in the Republican primaries, in the polls. And he's up in the latest polls as well against Joe Biden. So I just look at that and I'm surprised by your view, Arlen. Not that I'm sure you're wrong. I'm not at all. I mean, you might well be correct, but I'm not seeing the evidence. And there you can see, let me get that one more time.
Yeah,
I'll ask you to subscribe one more time. If I have yes, there's that square. So Arlen, I wanted to share with you and go over with you what they do at the New York Times, what two much more, I would say, centrist, especially Stevens. I'd call him a center. Well, I guess both he and Gail Collins are center right in my view. I know she would recoil and insist that she's a liberal, and maybe she's a liberal, but she's not progressive in any sense when it comes to what am I trying to say here? When it comes to economics,
but obviously Collins is a little bit more democratically, favored, and while Stevens will go the other way. And I do read those too, and it's very interesting to see how they banter back and forth about all these issues. It's worth reading for sure.
It sort of reminded me of our discussions a little bit. There were certain comments that I thought I really wanted to go through because there was, I thought, a lot of very interesting back and forth. A lot of fodder for me to be critical of the New York Times, and for you, I think, to maybe more defend the Times. So in light of what I knew was going to be an impending conversation about Trump versus Haley, I saw this headline, Nikki Haley can do a lot of damage, and I wanted to read it, especially because I know that you want Trump to be damaged. You want him to be wounded. And so to the extent that that can happen, you would be pleased. So I wanted to go through this column. And first, I'll just say this, Arlen. I don't think that either of these two shares your sanguinity when it comes to the potential of a Trump defeat. They seem pretty confident that.
Well, Cal, if I may, that's what really bothers me. And I talked about it in my article, is that there's conventional wisdom, and conventional wisdom isn't always right. And it just bugs me that these so-called experts are so sure this is going to happen when all the evidence, at least from what I could see, is it's going the other way. So, I could be wrong, of course. There's always that minor possibility, but I just think,
I want to push back on what you just said, because you said you have problems with the conventional wisdom, but you rely on the conventional wisdom, do you not? I mean, I've often heard you quoting from columnists in the New York Times, reports in the Washington Post, what they broadcast on CNN and MSNBC. So those seem to be your go-to sources a lot of the time. It's just you don't like this particular wisdom. Is that right? It's in this particular case you have a problem with what they're saying. It's not you always have a problem with what they're saying.
Well, there's some people, some of the experts that I do like and I rely on more than others, but I just think it just seems like people are jumping on this bandwagon that Trump can't lose because he's, has so many votes tied up and solidified. And, I don't think so. Like I said, there's lots of time left, lots of problems for Trump to, reveal how disturbed he is. And I think over time, that'll make the difference.
So you're just saying Stevens and Collins are clearly wrong when Collins doesn't say this, but she seems to agree with Stevens. It's fair to say that Haley has no chance of being true. Actually, she does say that, but I want to, I thought she had an interesting quote. So we can belabor this over and over. I want to make one quick point though about New Hampshire. I saw the results from New Hampshire somewhat the same way you did, Arlen. I was like, well, he won by just over 50%. That's not really convincing. He is a former president. He is the front runner, and yet he could barely get over half the Republican voters. But there's a lot of caveats, which David Axelrod made on CNN. That particular primary included independents, a lot of independents. The Republican Party is not your South Carolina. It is not your Republican Party of the Old South or your Republican Party of the New West. That is a very libertarian state, which has it does not have and is a very highly educated state. And those are two segments of the Republican electorate, the highly educated Republican and the more libertarian Republicans who don't particularly like Trump. Remember, Trump's a populist. He is not a, let's get rid of all government type of Republican. And yet, even in that state where Trump's opponents had pretty much everything on their side, they still couldn't they still couldn't keep him from getting 50% of the vote. Plus, that's what Axelrod said. And he also pointed out, next stop, South Carolina, Nikki Haley is way behind in her home state. She loses there, it doesn't look good for her.
Well, you're ignoring right now Iowa. Iowa is very advantageous for Trump, and I think he should have done a lot better. And he really didn't. He has about the same number of votes as he did in New Hampshire, just barely over 50%.
Well,
so,
his look, number 2 in Iowa was DeSantis. Haley said she was going to come in second. She came in third. Vivek Ramaswamy put a ton of hope into Iowa. He came in fourth. Those two men both dropped out and endorsed Trump. You might say that the results weren't as positive for Trump as he might have hoped, and I accept that. But the outcome in terms of the facts leaving the state are 2 of his top 3 opponents dropped out, and the only one still standing performed worse in Iowa than she had hoped to perform.
Well, you also have to consider that Trump is going to need more than just his cult base. He's going to need independents. He's going to need Republicans who are a little bit more moderate. And, I think it'll be hard for him to get those as time goes on, based on what I was talking about, all his court cases, all his confusion when he talks. So I think you got to, keep that in consideration too.
I agree with that. So I thought this was very interesting. They're talking about whether Nikki Haley continues. Stevens said, I think we can agree that she's not going to win. She's not going to defeat Trump. That's what Stevens says, not what Arlen says. What Stevens says, do we want her to drop out? Or maybe even run as a third-party candidate since she can't win as a Republican? That's the assumption underlying the question by Stevens. I thought this was a very interesting response. Third parties are for people who don't care who wins the election, and I'd like to think she's better than that. I want to break that into 2 different parts. So basically what she's saying is, if Haley continues, it's almost like a third-party run. She's not going to win. She's only going to sort of maybe be, nipping at Trump's heels. That's what Collins said. I'm not saying you're saying that. That's what she's saying. And she's saying, I like that people who do that don't really care who wins. And she thinks, according to Collins, that Haley is better than that. The reason this struck me, third parties are for people who don't care who wins the election, is I was like, yes, I agree with that. I have been supporting alternative candidates. I don't want to call them third party candidates. I supported Dr. West. I no longer support him. I think he has demonstrated very poor judgment, and I like his policies, but his judgment is so poor that I can't support him at this point. Of course, if he were the only candidate running in the general election versus Trump and Biden, I would vote for him. But I think Jill Stein is a better choice, so I'm going to vote for her. But it's true. I don't really care whether it's Trump or Biden. I do think they're both very, very bad. I do think our country is headed in a very bad to a very dark place. It's already in one, but it's continuing down to that dark place, regardless of which one is president. So yes, I agree with that. I like your thought.
Well, of course, excuse me. Of course, no, I agree. I think it's. Well, let me put it this way.
I mean, you disagree with what I said. You do care who wins.
Well,
you don't want Trump to win. It's really, really important to you that Trump lose to Biden. That is not important to me.
It'll be terrible if Trump won. I think our country would change much.
But
much
it
for the
would
worse.
also be terrible if Biden wins.
Biden's not going to destroy democracy.
Arlen, we're involved in endless war in Ukraine, even though most Americans oppose that. We are supporting genocide in Israel right now. How is that not an end to democracy?
It's a whole lot different. I think if you have Trump there, you're going to not be able to vote in a democratic way anymore. I think he will pretty much prevent Democrats from winning any elections from henceforth when he's elected. And I think, that's horrible.
Well,
and
we didn't even have a real Democratic primary. There's no even Democratic primaries right now. I think from what I understand, New Hampshire, some of the states tried to keep Democrats off the ballot, right? They didn't want Marianne Williamson's name even on the ballot. There are no debates on the Democratic side. How is that in any way democratic?
Well, there you get to the what I've been talking about also for a long time is that our system of voting, our elections are so, wrong, so misguided, so, they're just not set up for a normal election. I mean, the one who gets the most votes doesn't win, and you have this electoral college, and that throws things off, and certain states, have, more rights than others. And, that now they're allowing states to make up their own rules about how their citizens should vote. And, all these things I think are undemocratic. And I think we need to really look at our Constitution. And by the way, there was, I don't know if you watched Bill Maher, but he came up with a commentary on Friday where he was pointing out the difference that in Brazil, they had much the same kind of situation. They had a Donald Trump type candidate who lost, and he rebelled against his loss, but the people wouldn't put up against it, wouldn't go with him. They rejected him. They kicked him out of the country, and that's so much different than our country. And one reason is because their constitution is relatively recent. It's something within the last, I think, 35 years. And while ours is, of course, well over 200 years old and, comes from a time when our founders weren't all that, sharp about the idea of everybody being able to vote. So, we have to change that, but, we're obviously not going to do it anytime soon. The Constitution is going to stay old and outdated, and that'll be a bad thing, I think. And you're going to have people like
to be fair, voters did vote out Donald Trump in 2020. They did. Yeah. And he's not president. So just like Bolsonaro is no longer president, I hope I said his name right. I'm not sure if I did. I think I did. He's not the president. Likewise, Trump is not the president.
But there's a big difference because they kicked Bolsonaro out of the country. The people would not accept that. They knew it was the wrong thing to do, and they were not tolerant of it. People were a lot more tolerant of Trump, spewing his lies and inaccuracies and even
You
though he
mean
had no
Lula?
facts, no
Lula is
evidence.
the socialist. Lula is the president again. He's the socialist. He is now president. Bolsonaro was the right wing,
Yeah.
sort of populist. But I'm still not clear what you're saying, because isn't Bolsonaro is facing some criminal charges? I'm not sure if he was ever. Both of them had faced criminal charges. I'm not sure what's happening with Bolsonaro. What is it that the public? And I'm sorry, maybe you were clear and I just misunderstood. What is it that the Brazilian public is rebelling against in Brazil? If you have that information.
Well, they just wouldn't accept what he was saying, and they basically kicked him out of the country. He had to leave. I think he lives in Florida now.
Oh, okay.
They weren't going to put up with somebody like, as crazy as he was, and disruptive as he was. While in our country, of course, people are willing to tolerate Trump for some odd reason. And,
well, do you think it's possible? Let me interrupt you, because I'm going to ask you a question. Do you think it's possible, which means I believe this, but do you think it's possible that one reason Trump is as popular as he is because, let's go with, forget about the poor for now, because Trump is awful when it comes to poor. But is popular is because working voters of all, and we've seen this, Latinos for Trump, African American men for Trump, white working class voters for Trump, all of them believe with reason that the establishment political classes in both parties, the ones that you've said, you even extolled how there used to be a sane Republican base. And I guess you're thinking of the people who voted for Dick Cheney and George W. Bush and Ronald Reagan. There used to be these sane, adults in the room in the Republican primary. They're all gone. Do you think maybe it's possible that the working class and the middle class, to the extent there still is one in this country, doesn't care what those establishment people say, because they have been betrayed by them?
Of course. I mean, what you're saying is true, and I sympathize with, most of the people in the country who can see that the system is not working for them, and there's much better ways of doing things than either the Republicans or the Democrats are doing. So, yeah, I can certainly understand it, and I can understand why, people are not too happy with Biden. And there's a lot of reasons, too, not only his age, of course, but, he doesn't, he could do a lot better. But
also, Arlen, not just with Biden, but they're also not happy with Nikki Haley. The Republican primary voters aren't rallying to Nikki Haley. Sure, she's getting some votes, but not very many. They're not responding to they didn't respond to Ted Cruz. They didn't respond to Jeb Bush. They didn't elect Mitt Romney. So isn't it a case where this very large group of voters, maybe clearly not 50%, but a very large and important block of voters, has said to both political parties, we don't want what you're selling. We don't believe you. We feel like you're not on our side. And that's why we're with Donald Trump.
Yeah, no, that sounds right. And it's understandable that people are frustrated and they're not getting what they want, and our country's not doing what it should be doing, and all those things. But I think Trump would only make them so much worse. And I don't.
But people don't see it that they don't believe that. I know you say that, but people don't feel like things could even get worse a lot of times. I mean, I agree things could, right? I mean, you could, if you're homeless, you might no longer get to sleep under a bridge. If you're living in a one-room apartment with 4 people, then you might be homeless the following week. If you're living in a small home, next week you might be in a 1-bedroom apartment. So it could get worse, but people are looking at their situation now and they're saying it's been getting worse and getting worse and getting worse, at least since the 1970s. I would argue certainly Reagan pushed us very quickly down a hill. But things have been getting worse for a long time, and voters are saying neither party is on my side. If they hate Donald Trump that much, if they're against Donald Trump that much, maybe there's something good about him. That's something that another Halitics poster pointed out. If the establishment is that far against Biden, there must be something. I'm sorry, if they hate Trump that much, there must be something good about him.
Trump, I think, thinks it has the advantage of him being a real effective con man, blowhard, overconfident. He comes across as somebody who knows all the answers and will solve all the problems. And I guess some people are willing to believe that because they don't see anybody else doing it. But and I'm no Nikki Haley fan, but I think she's better than some of the other candidates like DeSantis and all the others who are pretty far right wing. At least she has had some respectable positions. She's been a UN ambassador. She's fairly, she's pretty articulate compared to many of the others. So, I think she's got some room to grow.
She's articulate, but the position you mentioned, the UN, is again, and I love the United Nations in some ways. I mean, I think we should be much, much more involved with the UN. I think we should rely on the UN to a much greater degree. That wasn't Nikki Haley's position, but still, she's a corporate establishment Republican. She fits very well within that country club set, not with the blue collar, tattooed, long hair, who now is looking at Trump as the only person who kind of gets me.
Yeah, I mean, don't misunderstand. I don't like Nikki Haley at all, and I think she has got some real problems. I just think she can act a little bit more respectfully than some of the others.
Well, you just can't stand Trump. Just face it. You hate him. You just aren't. You can't see anything. Not only can't, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's not just that you can't see anything that might even be arguably good in Trump, which I have trouble seeing too. Although I do see some policies that I agree with, you can't even see anything good in anyone who might even consider voting for Trump. Is that fair?
I have been diagnosed with Trump derangement syndrome by many people, and a lot of us have that. Because there's really nothing hardly good that you could say about Donald Trump. He's really never done anything other than anything that benefits himself.
We've talked about this. He got us out of the war in Afghanistan, Arlen. He did impose some tariffs. I don't think they were nearly good enough. He overstated the case, but it was still something to bring jobs back to the United States. He did not involve us in any new wars, which is incredibly important. Those are big deal things, Arlen. Those are not nothing burgers. And you can say stop aid going to Ukraine for a moment. That's a good thing. You can argue the motives all you want. He was just trying to get, Hunter Biden prosecuted, whatever. It was still the right thing to do. It was still a positive thing. So, and what he did resonated very well with people, with families that have been decimated by the endless war machine, whose jobs have been sent overseas. Those policies are recognized as good for America by a very large minority of Americans.
Well, I think you have to look also that Joe Biden has objectively done some very good things too. I think a lot more than Trump has done. I mean, he's picked up the economy. He's, inflation's going down, stock market's going up.
Well, that's a different argument. That's a different point. I mean, if you want to say between the two, I think Biden isn't as bad. Okay. But to say there's nothing good, there's no reason that anyone would support Trump, that to me does not really comport with, I think that we have to be able to put ourselves in other people's shoes to a degree and see why they might. Now you got someone like a Hitler whose main platform was it's the Jews' fault. It's very tough for me to empathize with his voters, but I don't think Trump fits into that box. He has not called for genocide. I don't like Trump. I think Trump's really bad. I see why he appeals to voters. I get that to a significant degree. All right, I want to move on though. I don't want to end this. Because we keep plowing the same trod ground. We're not getting anywhere. Arlen with us. Call if you want. 240. Would love to talk to you. 242-5646. I looked at the number. You can see it on your screen. Do you agree with this? That if Nikki Haley ran with Manchin in this no labels group, that it would hurt Trump more than Biden?
That's another problem with our political system. One of many is that, if you have a third party candidate or people in there, that just throws the whole election completely off the table. So, I mean, it's just hard to predict, and it shouldn't happen this way. But people who are running third party can certainly damage an election and change things considerably. So, yeah, I mean that there's all kinds of things that could happen.
Well, I think Stevens likes the idea. Stevens definitely suffers from Trump derangement syndrome. I think more so than you, Arlen, because you're not a Republican. You've never supported Republicans. He is a Republican. He does support Republicans, and yet he totally disdains Donald Trump. So he clearly, to me, is more of a TDS victim because, he's not even supporting the party that Trump is a member of, or he won't support Trump even though Trump's a member of his party. He says, I like your thought on this. Do you believe Nikki Haley and Manchin would appeal more to voters who would otherwise vote for Trump or voters who would otherwise vote for Biden?
Yeah, I think it might hurt Trump more, but I just don't know for sure. I can't see Nikki Haley doing that. I can't see her running as a third party candidate. If she doesn't win the Republican nomination, I don't see her going anywhere else. That's my
because
opinion.
It would hurt her chances down the road. She wants to run as Republican in future races. Yeah. I agree with that. 100%, Arlen, 100% on that. I also would just, though, say I think a Haley Manchin ticket would hurt Joe Biden. And the reason I say that is because I think Haley and Manchin's policies are a lot closer to Biden's than they are to Trump's.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I'm not going to say definitively one way or another, who would benefit or not benefit. But anytime you have anything like that, whether it be Robert F. Kennedy or, your candidate or whatever, it throws things off and it could, mess up the whole picture, and it's very unpredictable. And that's why we need to change the Constitution and make it so that the person with the most votes actually wins the presidency.
Yeah, of course I agree with you there, Arlen. That's easy. And in fact, I think you probably agree, maybe not. It would be nice also to have ranked choice voting, so there wouldn't even be this argument about spoilers. You can vote for whoever you think is best, and then you can rank number 2, number 3. And if the person that you like best isn't able to get a significant number of votes, then your vote can register. I know a lot of Democrats believe that if that had been the case in 2016, Hillary Clinton would have won because even though she got a plurality of votes, I think a lot of Democrats think that Jill Stein voters would have voted for her and that would have put her over the top as a second choice. I'm not convinced of that. I wouldn't have. But maybe in Michigan, maybe they would have in Michigan. I don't know. But I wouldn't have put I wouldn't have put Hillary on my ballot ever. Not that I would have put Trump. I would have just had Stein as my candidate. All right. So here is one of those issues that I think you see as redounding against Trump, militating against his candidacy. This $83 million jury verdict against Trump in favor of Carol, whom he allegedly raped. I say allegedly because there's never been a criminal justice finding. He's never been charged criminally. It was a preponderance of evidence standard that he was found liable in New York. Yeah. What do you think of that? And are you happy about it? Do you have any views one way or the other? Do you think it hurts Trump?
Well, I'm happy for E. Jean Carroll, and I think it's going to definitely hurt Trump, and I think there's going to be more of that stuff coming along. What about his case with all his businesses in New York? I mean, once they, finish that one, and he has to pay like $300-something million, and if they hopefully prevent him from running a business in New York, I mean, that's going to be a big one. So, and he'll definitely go off the rails and get even crazier, I think, if that happened.
Well, it's interesting because his rhetoric, and I think you made this point, Arlen, maybe it wasn't you. I think it was actually, Gail Collins made the point that even if you have problems with the way that verdict and that lawsuit came about, which was by virtue of a special dispensation by the New York State legislature that allowed for like 2 years lawsuits to be brought that otherwise would have been outside the statute of limitations. And I have a huge problem with that. I I think on appeal, this verdict, this entire suit could be thrown out on the ground that that Trump was denied due process. I don't know how you can have due process. I don't know how you can be sued based on allegations that occurred long before the statute of limitations had expired. I mean, you know, at a time when if it occurred then, the statute had expired. I don't know how you can resuscitate a lawsuit. It seems to me that puts Trump in an impossible situation. I agree with Bret Stephens when he says that, but I also agree with Gail Collins when she says Trump's behavior, you know, he's such a loose cannon. He's just going out there insulting her, attacking her. It looks really bad. I get why he was pissed off. And did he rape her? Maybe he did. I don't know. But, and if he did, it's awful. But it also, you know, but whatever happened, I get why he was pissed off that this suit came so late. But he as usual, shows zero presidential demeanor. He has no gravitas. He's immature. And I think it's a good argument he shouldn't be president.
Oh, it's a good one. And you know damn well that E. Jean Carroll's not the only one that he's gone, you know, after sexually in his life. I mean, he's done probably many of those things, but, you know, unfortunately, we don't have the videotape for a lot of them or the proof. But everybody knows, I mean, from the time that he said, you know, you could grab women anywhere you want on their bodies, you know, you knew what kind of person he is and what he, you know, what kind of person he you know, will continue to be. So.
Well, I mean, either way, I you know, he's a bad guy. Okay, so he's a predator. We can leave it at that, except to say, I don't see how this hurts him. His voters don't care about that stuff. They care about bread and butter issues. They care about their jobs. You might say that they're wrong to think Trump is going to get them their jobs back or get them more pay or have them treated better, but they don't care about stuff like that. And they don't even care if he sexually assaulted an extremely affluent writer. You know, they view that as that's rarefied air for them. These folks, and I say black, Latino, white, it doesn't matter. That's why stuff like when Trump says, "Oh, Obama wasn't born in the United States," they don't care. What they want is a job where they have decent wages, a chance to live in a decent home and get health care. That's what's important to them. And for whatever reason, and it's important to them because they don't have those things. When you're economically secure, you can worry about other things. These people aren't. They're very afraid of their future, for their futures.
Well, when you say they,
and so, you know, I don't think this matters much for, at least among his base.
Yeah, I just don't think his base is big enough to make all the difference. I think the people are going to start, you know, disappearing from his cult, from his base along the way. I think there's going to be always going to be a certain percentage that will, you know, believe anything he says and will vote for him or support him no matter what. But I think it's not going to be half the country. It's not going to be all the Republicans, and eventually he'll get worn down is the way I look at it.
All right, well, I put up this quote. I don't know if people were reading it or not. This is more from Bret Stephens. This is where I agreed with him most. I disagreed with a lot of what he said. I'm going to get into why I think both of them are completely clueless in significant ways, and why the New York Times has so little. Why I think the New York Times support is actually harmful to candidates in certain areas, certain parts of the country, certain demographic groups. But this is where I come down with it. He's accused of a heinous crime. Rape is a heinous crime. He's accused of it. He has no means of defending himself. It wasn't even told what day it occurred. Allegedly, the rape occurred. She said she didn't remember. If he had any witnesses that he knew about, he's certainly not going to be able to find them. And moreover, if he had even, let's say that there had been an encounter, a sexual encounter at that department store back in 1995 that he remembered very well, just assuming it's true, but his recollections, if they have the same, they remember the situation differently, or she claims differently now, and he remembers it a different way. He remembers that it was uncomfortable, it was awkward, but in the end, it was consensual. And not only that, he believes he has some evidence to support that claim. Okay?
No, he has no evidence.
Let's just say that's true. Let's just say that. And then 5 years or 10 years later, the statute of limitations runs out in 2005, 2006. He knew there was a witness. There was someone who had been standing outside the dressing room who, when they came out, said something like, looks like you two had a good time in there or something. Or sounds like you two had a good time in there. That would be a statement that would actually be exculpatory, right? If the person had said, oh, it sounds like you two had a good time in there, right? Like trying to be funny. But that sounds like it's exculpatory because it's like she was enjoying it, according to that witness, is what they heard. Trump gets the name of that witness, or he knows the person or something. And then 10 years later, there's no lawsuit. There's no criminal charges, nothing. Trump's like, okay, I walked. I got away with this. Then now, 20 years after that, suddenly he's sued. How can that possibly be fair?
Well, let me say this. I don't know all the evidence in that particular case, but it seems to me I kind of remember that she told people, respectable people, right after the event, and, they remember it. And there seems to be, more than one individual on her side that can, make some, have some memory of that. So I think that has to be taken into account.
But he doesn't. But he's got to be able to defend himself, and now he can't because of the time lapse. And I don't think her witnesses were so clear either. I don't think they were. It was like so cut and dried. But okay, I just think that's not how lawsuits should occur in our country. So
the jury gave him that, gave it to her. They supported her and.
They did. They absolutely did. And, and we'll see what the appeals court says. Okay. So Bret Stephens says what really, and I think this is something that you are very concerned about, Arlen SMI, big problems with the news business, that it's losing big money. And even newspapers like the Washington Post, owned by Jeff Bezos, a $100 billionaire, the LA Times, owned by an extraordinarily wealthy billionaire, they're losing so much money that these billionaires aren't happy about it. This is very serious. You talk about threats to our democracy. I think not having a plethora of news sources that have professional reportage is a very serious threat to democracy.
Oh, it is. No question about it. I'm a former journalism major. I believe in journalism, news, and all that. And I think people, have to have, that kind of information to make intelligent decisions. And it's more and more, it's just everybody's sticking to their side and, only their side. And the American people are going to be hurting from it. And, especially, small town newspapers are disappearing, and they're the ones that keep the local governments under control and make sure there's no corruption there. So, in so many ways, in so many places, our news media is being hurt. And, I wish there was a better way of going about doing it.
Well, you make the same point that Gail Collins made about local news, which is that having a reporter who goes to city council meetings, school board meetings, and the like really does keep these local Pauls on their toes. And now we don't have that. We don't have that watchdog. And that's a very, I don't, she though, and let me just show this up if I can. We see it the same way in terms of I think it is a threat. I don't know how, an informed citizenry, if that's the right word, is critical to democracy.
It is.
And without it, obviously the politicians and the billionaire class will absolutely run roughshod over everybody else. Gail Collins blames the internet, pure and simple. And it's understandable. The New York Times was extremely profitable. I believe the Washington Post was very profitable. LA Times probably very profitable. Radio stations, I know this for a fact, were very profitable before the internet. They no longer are. So that's where she lays the blame.
Yeah, don't forget.
Stevens doesn't agree with that completely, but I just wonder whether you think that's a sufficient answer. It's the internet.
Well, it's important. I mean, look what's happening to Twitter with Elon Musk. He's totally decimated that company. There's a lot of people that followed, what Twitter, and now it's called X, I guess. But he's putting his point of view across, his right-wing crazy conspiracy theories. He's not fact-checking like they used to do. And a lot of people are going to see that stuff and have a distorted view of what is really going on. And there's no way we could stop that.
Well, Twitter, to be fair, Twitter, Facebook, I mean, these are not news organizations. They're basically just, like akin to the old poster board in the town square, right? This is like the town crier. This is like somebody who's standing with a microphone in the on the common, right? I mean, you read what people post on Twitter, that's just their own opinion. I think we all know that. I don't think it's not like a newspaper or TV station where there's an assumption, maybe not always warranted, that they're a reliable, somewhat responsible purveyor of news. I don't think people read Twitter feeds for that purpose. Now, some may say, oh, well, they may have their favorites, but I don't. I think the general feeling is, even on the hard right, I'm not talking about working class, but I think most people get, if you read something that the New York Times tells you happened on day 3, it happened on day 3. I don't think that's why people go to Twitter or Facebook or social media in general.
Yeah, but people do go there a lot, and they do listen to that. And how else are they going to make informed decisions? I mean, there's no other way to do it. And somebody like Elon Musk could put out those algorithms and make sure that millions of people see what he's saying. And he has a lot of power.
But is he supposed to be a gatekeeper? Do you want Twitter? My problem is more when they act as gatekeepers. My problem is more when they look at stories and they say, well, we're not going to let this go out there because it's not true. I don't want Twitter deciding what I get to see. Now, I think there should be some limits, but I think those should be government imposed, and they should be subject to lawsuit to challenge for violations of the First Amendment. But if somebody posts on Twitter that they got, that they don't trust vaccines, I think I don't think it's up to Elon Musk could get to delete that. Or if somebody posts on Twitter that, or on Facebook, I don't know, something, they block stuff. I don't really know, I can't go back and, okay, someone says Trump's right, the election was stolen from him. I don't want Mark Zuckerberg posting, well, this isn't, doesn't meet our journalistic standards. If I write you an email and I say, Arlen, Trump didn't steal the election, who's there to say that? I can't say that. I think people should get to say whatever the hell they want, as long as it's not scurrilous or dishonest.
Yeah. Well, that's what Elon Musk feels, but I think there are better ways of doing it. I think there has to be some standards, and where they're going to come from. When you get the government involved, that's always a problem. But you can't just, let's say, start spouting Nazi propaganda from Twitter, and nobody, controls it. I don't think that's a good idea either. So there has to be standards.
Well, I mean, you could sue. Let's say somebody posts Nazi hate stuff on Facebook or Twitter. It seems to me there are recourses beyond simply having the platform delete it. I wouldn't have a problem with that. I think there should be a certain line, which is you don't get to treat groups of people as inhuman. You don't get to call for murder, for mass murder. That should not be allowed. I agree. I would draw that line. Yeah. So I'm not saying you should get to post anything you want, but I'm not sure. But that line should be pretty. It should be pretty bright, and it should be pretty hard to cross it. But it should be, but you should be able to cross it.
Yeah,
but it should be hard to cross, in my view.
It's a very tricky subject, and we're still trying to figure out, how to do it, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, or whatever, the newspapers, the Fox News, whatever. Yeah, all those things have to be thought about. And, if they're lying, if they're telling total falsities that you could prove, well, maybe there's a way to sue them, but then you go through the courts and, that takes time, and it's a mess. I'm not sure I have the answer, but I kind of agree with you. There has to be some kind of standards about, you can't, say a whole group of people deserves to die or whatever. I mean, there has to be some kind of control.
And certainly you can't slander or libel. You can't say so-and-so is a child molester without having, evidence that, credible evidence to support it, in my view. I don't think you should be allowed to say that because it's just too destructive, too harmful to the person.
But I think Trump has said a lot of those kind of things.
Well, fine. If you want to say Trump said this or Trump said that, I think you have a stronger case if you wanted to call Bill Clinton a child molester, and I wouldn't even do that. But I think you'd have a stronger case. He went down to that pedophile island. As far as we know, Trump was never on that island.
Well, maybe not.
Well, as far as I know, maybe I'm wrong. I'm not aware of evidence that he was on the island. I think there's very credible evidence that Clinton was on that island. So.
But there's no evidence that Clinton did anything there.
I think there is. I think there was a woman who said he molested her, or he said something. I have to go back and look into that. I might be wrong. Yeah, so here's what Gail Collins said that I think, is right up your alley there. And we agree. We don't have to spend a lot of time on it. But yes, how do you get reliable reports on local communities? It's very tough. And we do need that. I'm not saying we don't have it, but I am saying it. I think that local communities are not protected.
There was a time, a long time ago, you may not remember it, but I sure do, when you could rely on, major networks and important newspapers and figure, hey, they're pretty center of the road and they're not going to lie to me. But then all of a sudden, when it was decided that news had to be profitable, then, everything changed. And then you get things like
yes. And that, I think, goes back at least to the deregulation of the 1980s, if not even before then. So
Clinton didn't help that.
No. There are many areas where the Clintons really betrayed America. All right, so I want to we're almost through the deck. I've got a few more, but I wanted to get this quote in because Bret Stephens, I said I agreed with him about E. Jean Carroll. He wrote something else, or I don't know, he said it in that conversation that I found very intriguing. And I wanted to just get to this too, Arlen, with your thoughts. Because remember, Gail Collins blames the internet. She blames the technology for the decline in profitability and the decline in local news coverage. And she's not wrong. But I really liked this quote from Stephens. I worry that we let ourselves off the hook a little too easily. And I'm always about people taking ownership, taking responsibility, saying, what can I do differently? So I always get very, very angry when Democrats start pointing fingers at Republicans rather than saying, yes, the Democrat Party needs to do this. We need to do that. I get very, very angry at Israelis who blame Hamas for for everything bad that goes on, even though it's really Israel that's responsible, and the bears far more responsibility in my view. I don't like it when people point fingers. I like it when people take responsibility for problems. So I really like it when Bret Stephens says, I think that we let ourselves off the hook too easily. And what does he mean by that? He means that, and what he means by that, I don't agree with. I mean, his explanation, I think, is very, very off. But let me just show it. He says the problem is that the media is just far too biased in a liberal direction, and it doesn't listen to, it doesn't have conservative voices. And it's so odd that he says this. I find this so strange because this is a guy who's totally against Trump, who can't say one positive thing about Trump, and yet he's claiming how, he's mad that the media tilts so far to the left, yet he himself is tilted and he doesn't even seem to get it. I thought it was very, so, and just adding to that, Arlen, I know I'm going on here, but I thought this was really the most instructive part of it. What his big beef here is how they don't talk about small business people, the challenges that small business owners face against well-meaning, as he calls it, but harmful regulations. And, he's so blind. He's so blind here. We need to understand and empathize with the lives and attitudes of people whose political and cultural outlook we rarely share. When has the New York Times, when has he ever written about Trump voters and shown empathy for their political and cultural outlook? None. The only group he points to are another elite group, business owners. Yes, they're not super wealthy, but people who are running a business, they're already probably doing pretty well, most of them. And the problem he's complaining about is too many regulations, rather than talking about people whose lives have been destroyed because there weren't enough regulations, like in East Palestine, Ohio, where the train went off the track because there weren't enough regulations to protect the people from a dangerous train. So even here, the corporate media, when he makes a good point where he says we're failing people, he completely misses the way big media fails people.
Well, the right has always been saying for decades now that the media is biased toward the left. And that, maybe there could have been some truth to that. But I think nowadays there's a lot of right-wing media. Fox, it has a lot of television imitators. There are a lot of, websites and, media of all sorts on the right, and that people who are on Trump's side can, access. So, I don't think that's a problem like it may have been at one time.
Well, Gail Collins responds by saying, and she, like Stevens, in my view, totally misses the point. She's like, oh, what do you mean it's because we're too far to the left? Look at all these right-wing editorial boards that are also struggling. No. What they refuse to say is it's not left versus right. It's rich versus everybody else. The viewpoints that these newspapers, whether it's the Wall Street Journal or it's the New York Times, they present the perspective of wealthy or, at a minimum, comfortable Americans. The viewpoint, the life of poor, struggling, and working people barely makes it into these papers. That's the issue.
Another difference is that the right wing is more than willing to lose money on their media. They're more than willing to lose money on setting up these think tanks like the Koch brothers did. And I don't think the left wing has people on their side who do those kind of things. Some of these billionaires are okay with losing some money in order to make their viewpoint known more. I just don't see where the billionaire Democrats or liberals or progressives are. Where are they?
Well, I agree with you there, but the response would be from, I think, a lot of people. Well, Jeff Bezos ran the Washington Post as a Democratic, liberal, standard liberal newspaper. MSNBC and CNN. Now, I would say my point is it's not left-right. It's not, or it's certainly not Republican-Democrat. To me, the cleavage point is rich versus everybody else. And every single one of these media outlets is on the side of the wealthy.
Yeah, all you have to do is look at our country and you'll see all the advantages go to people who get the tax breaks, who keep getting richer, and all the rest of the country.
But the media's on their side. It's not just that they win, but but who's calling them out? Who in the so-called left media is calling them out?
Well, that's why I'm saying I think there's a lot of right-wing media that is a very strong presence, and maybe there's some left-wing media, but I don't think there's many. I mean, if beyond MSNBC and CNN, who else is there?
MSNBC, Arlen, MSNBC is on the side of the billionaire class. Just exactly the same as the Wall Street Journal. Both of them are on the side of the billionaire class, and both of them are against working people.
Yeah, but Republicans wouldn't agree with you on that.
Would they? I think they would. What do you mean they wouldn't? They would agree. They would say, "Oh yeah, they're both on the side."
No, they would say, "Hey, MSNBC has only left-wing, commentators."
Oh right. They do. They define left-wing as identity politics. But I don't think there are too many people who are working in factories who would say, "Oh yeah, MSNBC is on my side when it comes to offshoring jobs."
No, but at least MSNBC is there if you want to alternate to some of the right wing.
Well, yes. I mean, if you want a pro-choice outlet, I suppose. But if you want to keep your job and you don't want it sent to China, then if you don't want war in Ukraine, then don't go to MSNBC.
Where do you go?
You commit suicide because there's no media that's pro-peace.
Yeah,
that's what you do.
Yeah,
that's you vote for Donald Trump. You know what you do? You vote for Donald Trump because he says, "I would make peace in Ukraine."
Yeah, if you're willing to believe Donald Trump, yeah, and a lot of people do believe everything he says.
Well, who else is saying? But no one else is. Well, he did, and he has some credibility on that issue because he did push for peace. He did push for an end to the Afghanistan war. He got it, and he did not embroil us in new war. So when he says, "I'll get us out of Ukraine," and he did stop the shipments of weapons to Ukraine, so he has some credibility there, I think, Arlen.
Well, yeah, but ultimately we know that Trump only cares about himself, and he's going to,
well,
say
you
what he
just
wants.
see because you're not looking at the data. You're just saying, "Well, that's who Trump is," because I guess that's what Rachel Maddow says, but I don't believe what Rachel Maddow says.
Well, I don't see Trump saying, "Oh, look, the working people need more money. We need more unions, all that kind of thing."
He doesn't say that, but he does say we shouldn't be involved in war in Ukraine. So if that's what you want, then if you don't want us in war with Ukraine, then that's who you vote for. And he did say we do need these trade deals are bad. He did flat out say that, and he did kill TPP, which would have cost us even more jobs.
Yeah, he probably got a couple things right, but he got most things wrong.
All right. Okay.
Yeah, that's my opinion.
All right,
anyway.
I'll let you have the last word. But that won't be it. Anything else? I thank you for coming on. I know you weren't 100%, so I really appreciate your challenging me, Arlen, and also bringing your perspective, especially on the imminent likely fall of Donald Trump. Well, before we get your final word, yeah, you must be kind of excited about the 49ers, right?
I was going to mention that. Yeah, I am excited about the 49ers. This is the Super Bowl I wanted to see, Kansas City against the 49ers. I think it'll be a great game. Taylor Swift will be there, and a lot of very good players, and it's going to get a lot of audience. It's going to get big ratings, and I'm very much looking forward to it.
How confident are you, Arlen, in your second-year quarterback up against, I would say, the second greatest quarterback of all time, who could conceivably become the greatest of all time?
Well, I think they're both excellent quarterbacks. Yeah, Mahomes has more experience, but Purdy got it done, or whatever his name is.
Purdy got it, Brock Purdy.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's fair. I think Purdy's still a little bit underrated. I really do. I mean, I'm hearing people say, "Oh, even there he didn't play so great against Detroit." And look, he brought him back in 2 straight games. He's played very, very well. He may not be. He's not Mahomes, and he also scrambled. He's very, very good. I think it's a toss-up game. It's a very probably. I give the edge. I'll just say this: I give the edge to Kansas City because of Mahomes. But I think either team could win.
Yeah, especially the 49ers have people like McCaffrey, and they have a lot of really excellent superstars on their team beyond the quarterback.
Agreed.
So,
More weapons. Although, frankly, though, he does have Kelsey. Mahomes has Kelsey, and they have a really good defense too. So,
well, they both have great players, so it'll be a
they
great
do.
game.
It's going to be a great game, Arlen. Anything else? Any final word? I hope you feel better, by the way.
Thank you. I do feel better already, and I'm glad you gave me the opportunity here, and we had fun.
I always appreciate you, Arlen. You don't have to thank me. I thank you. That'll do it for today. I'm going to do what I like more than anything else. I'm going to actually mute Arlen. Now, if he starts moving his mouth, you won't be able to hear him. I don't really listen anyway. So, oh, wait, he can hear me. He can hear me. Now he's signing. All right, we'll be back. I'll be back tomorrow. Arlen, I'll be back next Monday.